Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So, Patrick, I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's a software called Magic the Gathering Online.
For now.
Yeah, well, Magic the Gathering Online had some interesting results, both for Standard and Modern over the weekend. I think that they are very War of the Sparktacular.
Yeah, I mean, this set is obviously no joke. Definitely some interesting pieces of technology littered throughout the Modern mocks. I wanted to see, if you wanted to start there, because I think it's, definitely we're at, obviously SCG Syracuse is this weekend, and there's going to be some big Standard on the horizon. But in the meantime, man, it's great seeing some of the impact of this set on Modern already. Not the least of which is this Sebastian Pozo's Planeswalker. You're sort of Azorius Super Friends, just blue-white Super Friends with 2 copies each of 5 different Planeswalkers.
Yeah, I mean, why not? You could just have, 2 Teferis in play next to a Narset, a Saheeli, and a Jace.
So basically 2 copies of Narset, Part of the Veils, 2 copies of Saheeli, Sublime Artificer, and 2 copies of Teferi, Time Raveler in the 3-cost spot to go along with the 2 Jace, the Mind Sculptor, and 2 Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. And obviously, Jace and Big Teferi are nothing new, but 3 different 3-cast Planeswalkers added. First of all, what do you think of Teferi, Time Raveler in Modern?
I mean, you know how I feel about Teferi, Time Raveler in Standard. I think that in Modern it is not as good, but it is still probably really powerful in terms of like being a mirror breaker, potentially being a combo messer-upper.
Well, the combo messer-upper part I wanted to kind of focus on, because I think that it might not be obvious if you just primarily play Standard how incredibly disruptive this is because of some of the nuances of some of how the rules work with some of the old mechanics. So specifically, for instance, if you were to cascade or play an effect that lets you play one of those spells that don't have costs for free, Teferi stops it entirely.
So he's just a one-man army against Living End.
Right. If you have Teferi, Time Raveler in play, your opponent can only cast spells anytime they can cast a sorcery. But when you cascade into a Living End, the Living End creates a trigger that you can play Living End, but the other spell is still on the stack. Like the Violent Outburst, for instance.
Oh, hold on, man. So are you telling me that all of those cool, like, Electro Dominance, Ancestral Visions, Greater Gargadon decks that we've been fawning over for however many months, that's just done now? That nonsense is over?
Right. Teferi puts all of those things completely on ice as long as he's in play. Now, if they attack him, if they can do like 5 or 6 damage to him over a few turns with their totally normal deck, they could get out from under it, but he completely shuts that entire line of play down.
That's so hilarious because their creatures are like Greater Gargadon, which can't get into play now, or like
that's another thing.
Timely Reinforcements tokens, which they're never going to be triggered. So remember,
with Greater Gargadon, removing suspend counters then would put the ability would then resolve on your upkeep or in the middle of the resolution of a Greater Gargadon, and that's not a legal time. Even if you removed the last counter to Greater Gargadon during your main phase, it would still create a trigger, and you wouldn't be able to play it if your opponent had a Teferi, Time Raveler.
That is so unreal. I think that if I were Sebastian Pozo or anybody coming after who's inclined to be on the Azorius Senate for Modern play, I would want to supplement the 2 Teferi Time Ravelers in the main deck with a couple more in the sideboard just to make sure that I was never going to lose to some of these folks.
Well, what's interesting is that there's another 3-cast Planeswalker in the sideboard that gives a little bit more flexibility in your matchups for tuning your 3-cost Planeswalker mix. Ashiok Dreamrender which is 1 blue in this deck. 5 loyalty to start with. Spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause their controller to search their libraries. So when you have Ashiok down, your opponent can't play things like Summoner's Pact or Primeval Titan. Like, that's a really potent thing to shut off, right?
Yeah.
And what's more, fetch lands. You can't use fetch lands when Ashiok is in play.
This guy is so ridiculous. I mean, like, just like a regular beatdown deck can potentially be crippled by this effect, which seems so unfair to me, right? Like, I was just going to go get a land to tap for red so that I could attack you for 2, but no. Ashiok's having none of it.
I don't know why the Ashioks are in the main deck. This card seems bonkers.
Well, it doesn't affect the battlefield very well, but I do have to say, I think that barring the fact that there are 3 Snapcaster Mages in the main deck, I mean, Ashiok, isn't it like a little bit better than Surgical Extraction? I mean, it's just the same thing. You know, it's not instant speed, but you've got like a very, very sizable passive ability sitting there that can have text in other matchups. And especially in games that you go first. Seems really strong.
So actually, let's talk about that ability, the -1 ability, because it's deceptively new. There's a little bit more layering to it than might appear on the surface. So -1 loyalty, target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard, then exile each opponent's graveyard. So what on the surface it looks like, okay, I guess Ashiok's milling and then exiling your opponent's graveyard, right? Which is obviously great graveyard hate. Can go after the Phoenix, can fight Dredge. But something you might not realize is you can target yourself with Ashiok, but it will still exile your opponent's graveyard. So, for instance, if you put down Ashiok and you don't think it's going to come to milling, one thing you can do is mill yourself so that your Snapcaster Mage has more options, or that you have a fresh look at the top of your deck because you put back stuff you don't want with Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Or if nothing else, you're giving fuel to a future Logic Knot, right?
Right. So, like, there are a lot of ways that a deck like this, and potentially there's other ways too, but there's a lot of ways you could potentially value milling yourself that normally you might think, oh, well, I don't want to exile my graveyard. But Ashiok's ability actually always exiles the opponent's graveyard, even when you mill yourself.
Yeah, I think that it's very potentially powerful, but I think we can't undersell the fact that if you've got 2 Ashioks, that implies 10 activations on this, and 10 activations at, 4 apiece. I think you could just kill somebody between your 2 Ashioks, right? Like if they can't put pressure on planeswalkers.
Yeah. Yep. Now, notably, this spells and abilities your opponent's control can't cause their controller to search their library. If you have a Field of Ruin, which this deck has 4, but if you play Field of Ruin and you do it to your opponent, they get to still search. It has to be their thing that would cause the searching. That said, if you have Ashiok and they try to Field of Ruin you do get to still search also. They don't.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Right. So a lot of now here's another one. If you surgical your opponent, it still works. But if they were to try to surgical themselves, they could not. They could go for the graveyard, but they couldn't search their library.
I mean, you need to have some really whack Chapin versus Nassif in the top 8 situation for someone to want to typically surgical themselves, right?
It's not that common of a play, though.
Yeah,
but,
it's pretty whack.
But dude, I don't know, man. Ashiok seems amazing to me. Game 1, I just want to play Ashiok in the main deck and just get people.
I'm gonna tell you a secret. It's been a while that this has been brewing. Been talking to our mutual buddy Landy Ho about it. I think I might switch over to the dark side, and by the dark side I mean Azorius for Modern. I mean, my stuff is just so played out at this point, and these cards are so good. Like, just Narset, right? Narset was a card you were fawning over in Standard last week, right? like, I was just like, oh man, 2 Jace the Mind Sculptor, how can that be right? Oh, I don't know. Preempt somebody with Narset? You take a lot of the edge off of the greatest planeswalker of all time if there's a Narset in play.
Yeah, if you put down Narset, if they try to use Jace's 0 ability, they will draw 0 cards, and then they'll have to put 2 from their hand back.
Yeah, that's fun times for you. I mean, like, this is nonsense. I think I would have the extra Teferis and the extra Narsets in my sideboard so that I could tune around which opponent I'm going to utterly cripple if I just draw one of my 3 cast and cost planeswalkers in a deck full of Opt and Serum Visions. Like, I think this deck is, I don't know if it's like the perfectly tuned version or whatever, but it can clearly defend itself perfectly fine with, you know, permission like Dovin's Veto, Logic Knot, Pad to Exile.
Well, so I want to point a couple things out, other tactical uses of Narset out. So obviously Narset shuts off cantrips like Serum Visions just brutally, right? It's not as effective against Opt because your opponent can still draw Opt, can still Opt on your turn and have it work because they get to draw 1 card each turn, including yours, if they play an instant speed draw spell like Cryptic Command or Opt.
Yep.
However, one thing you can do is really slow down a Tron deck because all their chromatic stars, all their chromatic spheres, they can only crack 1 a turn and only on your turn, which is not the time to give them green mana.
Oh, man, that is just complete nonsense.
So you can really slow down a Tron deck a little bit in certain draws. You know, sometimes they'll just have it all together already and no big deal. But that's actually another part of the reason why I think Ashiok is so amazing. If you have Ashiok, they can't Sylvan Scrying or Expedition map at all. Like, it's just...
Wow.
Yeah.
So the thing is, even though you have all these awesome tools, I feel like this isn't a huge margin stack. I feel like you just got to have like a pretty good deployment of your resources, get one of these real relevant permanents in play, and then still play pretty well for the next 15 turns to win. Is that a correct assessment,
Definitely.
even if you're ahead?
Yeah, because I think part of it is that these suppression cards can topple, right? Like these disruptive elements, sometimes people can get rid of your hate bear, so to speak. I think we're going to see a real uptick in Planeswalker removal in Modern, though.
Yeah, I mean, if they just have enough time, right? So if you give them like 7 turns or something, they're just going to naturally draw their Tron pieces, and then they're going to cast some burly thing, and you're going to eventually run out of permission, maybe. You know, that I think you do have to kind of figure out a way to end the game, and a lot of their big spells can actually either remove key permanents from play, you know, whether it's an All Is Dust or an Oblivion Stone, or, you know, depending on which one it is, even attacking with a Wormcoil Engine. So, like,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I believe it. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Finish. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying, like, I feel like you're often in these situations where, like, it looks like you're way, way ahead. Like, the advantage bar is, like, totally on your side on turn 4. But, like, you know, if you don't do something, you're gonna you know, let them back in the game. That's not the case
Definitely.
for like aggressive decks. You know, if you're like, you know, if you're 75% likely to win on turn 4, if they don't do something, you know, you're likely to win.
Yeah, I think once you ultimate Jace the Mind Sculptor to Teferi, you can have it pretty sewn up. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria.
Oh, yeah.
But until then, I think the game's going to really be held together by thread and, you know, bubble gum. Maybe a rubber band or 2. But like this Saheeli, I guess, is a concession to getting the game over with. But I don't know if I believe in Saheeli as much as Teferi, Narset, and Ashiok.
So I think that 2 Saheeli might be excessive. I do think Saheeli's pretty cool, right? So this is a deck that's got 4 sorceries and 19 instants. So the fact that it has 10 planeswalkers is, you know, there's obviously all these planeswalkers going on, but only 3 creatures, right? So almost every spell in this deck triggers Saheeli, right? So that's...
Yeah, but I don't want a 1/1 every turn.
I mean, it's put...
And there's not that many cantrips. Nah, I don't know. Ashiok puts them on a better clock. Like, the Saheeli, if the tokens flew, I think we'd be talking something different. But the fact that you get nothing out of... I mean, I guess in theory, you can do weird parlays where, like, for instance, you can convert your 1/1, one of your 1/1s into a Celestial Colonnade until end of turn. But yeah, I know. It's not very attractive. It's mostly about that passive, and I think if the passive tokens flew, they'd have so much more utility.
So I think that one of the things that's going on here is if you deploy the Saheeli first, right? It's the first one you get, or even second, right? And then you're making your proactive play. You're making a Jace, or you've got like a Teferi or a Narset or whatever on 3, and then you like leave one open, and then you Path or Spell Pierce. It's not that you're necessarily putting them on some sort of like super lethal Cobra Kai head kick or anything. It's just the inherent combat engine of Magic is such that if they don't have more creatures than you have Saheeli tokens, they can't effectively attack your planeswalkers at all, right? And I think like it's a very good time.
I don't know, man. Isn't timely reinforcements so much better?
Yeah, but it doesn't always work.
Neither does Saheeli.
That's fair.
You put it down and you don't have any blockers. I don't know. I guess I just think that you can only play so many 3s. And Narset, Teferi Time Raveler, Ashiok, Snapcaster my Path or my Spell Pierce or my Opt. That's so many 3s I want to play.
So I do think that this deck is a super important step forward for Azorius players in Modern, but there are still some glaring holes. I think that I'd want to address some of them.
Like what?
Like, don't you want like more timely reinforcements type stuff in main or side? Like, I have lost to this type of archetype so many times in like top 8 matches, and it's always because they have like 2 or 3 in their main deck, and if they don't have those tools, like, you know, they're dramatically I mean, I don't know, maybe people won't play aggro anymore because these cards are so cool, but I don't think that that's a long-term, you know, nobody's going to play aggro ever again. And separately, I think I would want like a 1 or 2 windmill slams. Like I'd want like a Lyra Dawnbringer and a Baneslayer Angel in my sideboard, something like that.
Oh, not me.
No?
Nah, I think with this many Planeswalker threats already, too many of the anti-Planeswalker cards people might play hit your threats anyway. Okay. And I think that people have to be prepared for Celestial Colonnade. If anything, I think you just want to have Vendilion Click in the sideboard.
Well,
and in fact, we do see that here.
Yeah, we see that here. I do think that the mix of like 2 Surgical Extractions main deck, 2 Rest in Peace in the sideboard, and 2 Ashiok in the sideboard is weird.
I would just play the Ashiok's main deck. I do think you want at least 6 of those cards. I don't know that you need this kind of a mix. I got a lot of respect for the graveyard shenanigans right now.
Yeah, but do you do this? Like, let's say you're playing against Jund, or you're playing against, you know, I was going to say like some Naya decks, but I guess this is not really true. But like Jund, maybe some of the black-green decks. Do you bring in Rest in Peace against Jund? You know,
probably not.
Like 1 Rest in Peace counters, you know, 4 Tarmogoyfs. Like that's
yeah.
No?
I guess not real. I mean, they have Abrupt Decay too, and they're going to have it anyway because you have so many Narsets and Saheelis and Ashioks or whatever. And besides, I think Ashiok is a more attractive way to go after them. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. You could use Rest in Peace. It's just, I don't know. I don't think you want it. I think you want more. You can only play with so many cards that don't affect the board as much. They might not even place Tarmogoyf against you.
Really?
They probably will, but I don't know. It depends on how much you're just Ashioking into next Tuesday.
I guess.
No, because your graveyard's still alive, so they'll probably Tarmogoyf. It's just, I just like Snapcaster Mage too much more than Rest in Peace. I would just not play Rest in Peace. I just really think you want your Snapcasters to buy back Path to Exile or whatever, or Cryptic Command.
That makes sense. I was thinking like, you know, the advantage of a deck like Jund, and, you know, very good players will often play Jund in large Modern tournaments. It's like they have so much progressive card advantage. You know, they've got like every kind of, you know, Bloodbraid Elf, or like they're angling on like this Tireless Tracker or Kalitas. They're always getting,
or Dark Confidant.
Yeah, whatever. They're getting some material from everything, right? But this deck is actually, generally speaking, I think better than that because it's got these things that are generating advantages for no mana and can suppress their creature attacks so effectively.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to note on Surgical, by the way, is that I do like some amount of Surgical Extractions for a couple of reasons. First, I think that Surgical is tactically very valuable against other Snapcaster Mage decks in a way that Ashiok is not, and you would definitely not want Rest in Peace.
So you're just like counterspelling their Snapcaster Mage with it?
Yeah, and for very low mana for high ROI turns.
Oh yeah.
Second of all, I think that Surgical Extraction is very potent against the Phoenix decks, Arclight Phoenix decks, in a way that Ashiok can be okay, but your opponent's going to very frequently be able to put the Phoenix in the graveyard the same turn they bring it back. And if you have a Surgical, you can actually get out of it, but if you just have Ashioks, you can't. And obviously you could board in Rest in Peace, but you're not going to main deck that.
Oh, they can certainly kill Ashiok also. It's not difficult for them to kill it.
And then second of all, Field of Ruin plus Surgical is a very important plan against Tron. And Ashiok doesn't have that same flexibility. Now, Ashiok is really good, but it's on a different axis, and I think you get more by stacking those effects than having all of one way.
So what you do is you just hit any Tron piece with Field of Ruin, put it into the graveyard, and then Surgical that Tron piece, right? And then now they can never assemble Tron.
Right. So generally, I could actually see myself just playing 2 Ashioks and 2 Surgicals main with 2 Rest in Peace in the sideboard. But I could also imagine playing just 1 Surgical main and 1 in the sideboard along with the 2 Rest in Pieces. I just like the Ashioks main.
You're just going to slay Saheeli then?
I don't know. I could be convinced, but I guess I don't believe in Saheeli unless you play a lot more cantrips. If I was going to play Saheeli, it would not be in a deck with just 4 ops and 1 Serum Vision. I think Saheeli gets better the more cantrips you play.
So if you look at Misplaced Ginger's deck, so Misplaced Ginger, couple folks down, also went 7-1 in the mocks. Shout out to KYT. Misplaced Ginger is one of KYT's over at the face-to-face games. Misplaced Ginger played Saheeli in the Arclight Phoenix blue-red deck.
See, I actually like it here. I think here this is an impressive amount of cantrips and does a great job of actually getting you a little bit more money for Saheeli, because these 4 Serum Visions, 4 Thought Scours, 4 Mana Morphos, 4 Opt, that's 16 straight up, but then also Faithless Looting is a not trivial amount of forward progress. So, like, the amount of tokens you'll be generating from Saheeli becomes so much faster that I think it starts looking like a very impressive card here. And compared to Young Pyromancer, it has the advantage of being a lot more durable of a threat, which is one of the big advantages to an Arclight Phoenix deck in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, and also, you've got, like, these potentially really imposing threat creatures that you can combo with Saheeli, right?
Yeah, I mean, sort of. You can with Crackling Drake, right? Like, if you ever turn your token into a second, like, you just play a Crackling Drake and then surprise, your token is hitting them for 10 instead of 1.
Yeah.
That's a nice play.
That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, that's a nice play.
But now looking at this deck in the context of the Azorius deck we were looking at a second ago, I mean, like, I think that just going, Spell Pierce, Stovin's Veto, Narset just cripples this entire strategy, right?
Makes it hard.
Like, and then all you got to do is play Protect the Queen on that Narset, and they're doing nothing.
I mean, they could just cast their cards. Remember, Thing in the Ice is their big plan, right?
That's their big plan against blue-white?
To get out of any of these things.
Oh, because they just need an attacker?
Well, if they're hitting for 7, they can actually... Like, Narset doesn't stop Thing in the Ice at all. And if you actually Thing in the Ice, you'll kill Narset in 1 hit.
Yeah, sure.
Just attack for 7. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I just feel like they can probably just path it or something. I mean, maybe. They are working you with Narset, after all.
It's possible that this deck ends up wanting to play a second Set Adrift. Set Adrift's been a really cool trend over the last 6 months. Playing in small numbers, this 5 blue sorcery back from Karn's block with Delve. Put target non-land permanent on top of its owner's library. And first of all, you can use this as a one-cost removal spell for problematic permanents. It's your out to lots of weird fringe cases. But it's also a Mondo combo with Thought Scour or Surgical Extraction, letting you make sure that you don't have to play against whatever that thing is next turn.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Also, just shout out to Desert Twister. This thing is like a Desert Twister casting cost for a Desert Twister-like effect, but with Delve.
Yeah. Non-land permanent, though.
Yeah,
so we'll go a little closer to Oblivion Ring.
Yeah, it is a pretty cool card. I think this card is very cool, and especially in a deck with Thought Scours of your own, right? So it's cool that it goes either way, right? Thought Scour of your own can fuel it, and Thought Scour of your opponents can turn it into kind of a weird predict situation.
Yep. Now, this wasn't the only Arclight Phoenix that did well. Sanso was playing an Arclight Phoenix deck after your or past Yu's Heart. Mono red Phoenix with with Faithless Looting, Forked Bolt, Lava Spike, Light Up the Stage, Gut Shot, Lightning Bolt, Metamorphose, with the Soulscar Mage and Monastery Swift Spear for 1-drops. I'm wondering. So I don't think this is a spot for Saheeli, but would you consider it here? I mean, is this?
No. So it's funny that you say this is like a Phoenix deck after my own heart. I've tested the Mono Red Phoenix in Modern a medium amount, not like the most, but I've tested it, I feel like, enough to come to the conclusion that I don't like it at all. It's like the blue-red deck without cantrips, right? And it's like the mono-red deck without consistency. Like, I don't know. This deck really needs to draw its cards in the correct order in a way that the blue-red deck doesn't, right? Because it has so fewer ways to set up the Arclight Phoenix. And then it gets less payoff because it doesn't have the cantrips. So you really just kind of draw your cards one at a time in this deck.
Yeah.
I don't know. It does well sometimes. So I don't know. I might not have a really well-formed...
I think it plays Blood Moon.
Well, that'll get you.
Sometimes you just Blood Moon people. One of the sweetest new uses of a Planeswalker in this event was Andy S.C. Wilson playing a Primeval Titan, Azusa Lost but Seeking, Amulet of Vigor sort of deck, right?
Oh, yeah, but with Karn, the great creator, as a 3 of in the main.
Right, so Karn plays some super interesting roles here. So, first of all, Karn 4 loyalty to come, or 5 loyalty but 4 cost, has this static ability. Activated abilities of artifacts your opponent's control can't be activated. So when you just have this in play, your opponent, it's one-sided, so you can still use your own engineered explosives and Coalition Relic, but your opponent can't use engineered explosives as a minor thing. More topically, they can't use Arcbound Ravager or Cranial Plating or any of the sort of like Hangerback Walker, Walking Ballista, none of that stuff, right? So you have this powerful hate aspect from it. It shuts off artifact mana when people occasionally do anything in that space, right?
Like a Mox, given he was playing in the Mox.
Right. And then the +1 ability until your next turn, up to 1 target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness, each equal to its converted mana cost. So, as if the first ability wasn't enough of a kick, you can target your opponent's Darksteel Citadel and turn it into a 0/0.
So you're just executing their permanents if they're 0 casting us artifacts.
Right, whether it's a Mox or Engineer Explosives or Lotus Bloom, any in that place, you could just make some progress by executing them that way. Additionally, you can actually power up your own Coalition Relic or Amulet of Vigor and attack with it. And in a deck that already has Sunhome Fortress of Legion and Slayer Stronghold, so that you have like real ways to power up your creatures, the ability for Karn to turn one of your random dinky artifacts into a creature that can get buffed by Slayer Stronghold and Sunhome Fortress is actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was just, when I first saw this deck list, I was just imagining the Amulet of Vigor coming across for 1. It's kind of cute.
Well, and we're going to get back to this +1 ability when we have the context of this -2 ability. See, so the -2 ability,
I think that's its real job, right?
That's its real job. The -2 ability, you may choose an artifact card you own from outside the game or in exile, reveal that card, and put it into your hand. So it's not just a wish, it's also out of exile, so it's like old school wish style. When you -2 this thing, and you can do it twice without losing Karn, but when you -2 this thing, you've got a heck of a toolbox. So first of all, we have the normal cards. We have 2 more copies of Engineer Explosives. So you can actually just solve a lot of problems and play a board control game by getting the 2 Engineer Explosives. Second of all, you could get Walking Ballista, which both gives you some cheap interaction and also gives you an anti-Blood Moon plan and also gives you a way to spend ludicrous amounts of mana if the game stalls out. Plus, Walking Ballista can solve a number of problems. And Wormcoil Engine. Wormcoil Engine is just a backup plan. You can just take over a game sometimes. You're like, well, it's not going very well. But maybe a Wormcoil Engine can stabilize for me.
I think I'm in for the Wormcoil Engine, in for the Walking Ballista. These guys make a lot of sense to me.
Tormod's Crypt gives you some Game 1 graveyard hate. You can just Karn, instantly go get your Tormod's Crypt and use it to slow somebody down. Or put it in play. But Mycosynth Lattice is where things get weird.
Yeah, I don't even know what this card is for.
Mycosynth Lattice is 6-cost artifact, and I actually hope that's on this one. Mycosynth Lattice, 6-cost artifact. All permanents are artifacts in addition to their other types. Chapter 2, all cards that aren't on the battlefield, spells, and permanents are colorless. Chapter 3, players may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. So working backwards, players may spend mana as though it were any color means you have an answer to Blood Moon in your sideboard. Everything's a mountain, but that's okay. You can cast all your spells if you Karn, which is colorless, for Mycosynth Lattice, which is colorless. Second of all cards that aren't on the battlefield, spells, and permanents are colorless. So if everything's colorless, it's kind of just some fringe things. It doesn't really matter too much here. But if you have Mycosynth Lattice, this part's actually kind of disruptive. But if you have Mycosynth Lattice, you can't actually Summoner's Pact anymore. So make sure you mean it if you go get the Lattice.
But I'm liking the Lattice. So if the Mycosynth Lattice is in play, nobody's triggering any Core Firewalkers. He loses protection from my stuff. I'm back, baby.
The top ability, though. All permanents are artifacts in addition to their other types. So if you have Mycosynth Lattice in play, first of all, you could destroy anything you want with, like, Reclamation Sage or whatever, right? Second of all, you can actually use Karn's +1 ability to change anything into an artifact creature. So you could, for instance, destroy a land every single turn and mana lock your opponent. That
is so cool.
You could also potentially target any problematic permanent and make it an actual artifact so that you just have more answers, you know, like you can just destroy artifacts. The big thing, though, is destroying all their land. And you have Blood Moon. So at the end of the day, you're able to get out from under it. You know, you can actually still play your cards.
So one of the possible play patterns is like play out a Karn, you know, if you got it on turn 3, Office of Curd Tribe, Scout or something, that's cool. And then you're like, go get Mycosynth Lattice, play Mycosynth Lattice, and then immediately start executing their stuff. If they're playing like a slow matchup without permission, I guess.
Yeah, if you could just stick Mycosynth Lattice after the Karn, the 1-2 punch together could kill something. Like at the very least, you could kill a land every turn if you wanted. You know, yeah, I think the main thing here is the out to Blood Moon. while also providing a path to victory. Because not only do you destroy Blood Moon, you get to hit one of their things every turn from now on.
You could also just make the Mycosynth Lattice into a Gigundous creature once you've destroyed all their lands, right?
Right. Karn lets Mycosynth Lattice attack for 6.
What a weird card. I mean, if you had just read me the description, you're just like, all right, here's a card. It's got 3 abilities. What should this cost? No way I would have said 6. Like, I don't know. 1? That's probably too low because this is weird. 3? I would not have named 6. I'll tell you that.
Yes. Another amusing thing, though, if your opponent cares about the color of their cards, Mycosynth Lattice is quietly disruptive. For instance, let's say that you wanted to play with, you wanted to pitch a green card to play your Nourishing Shoal. You would have no green cards. So you would just not be able to.
I like it. It's
obviously way on the fringes, but it's another tactical maneuver you could potentially find a spot for.
I mean, if you found yourself in a position where you were still alive against a player who was trying to beat you with Nourishing Shoal, I think there are worse things you could do than get your Mycosynth Lattice.
Yep. Probably so. Nobody really plays Flash Freeze anymore, but that would be shut off. Man, there's a lot of weird new interactions to figure out. Okay, and so actually, Karn the Creator also showed up in Eldrazi Tron in the hands of Pathy, packing a playset for Karn the Creators in Eldrazi Tron with, full-on 4 Urza Mine, 4 Urza Power Plant, 4 Urza Tower, 4 Eldrazi Temple, with Karn being able to go get Mycosynth Lattice again, Walking Ballista, Relic of Progenitus, Ensnaring Bridge for lockout potential.
That's pretty cool, right? So you can go get Ensnaring Bridge, which is a really unusual card for a deck with 17 creatures that usually wins by attacking. And then sit back on Planeswalkers and maybe get a bunch of advantage with Crucible of Worlds?
Well, remember, if you lock them with Ensnaring Bridge, you can destroy a land every turn when you get Mycosynth Lattice. And once your opponent has no land, I mean, you get to keep ticking up Karn from this +1. So eventually, you can go get all your colorless cards. You can go get Crucible of Worlds if you want. Get the band back together. There's a lot of stuff here. Crucible of Worlds has particular meaning in this deck because not only do you have access to Ghost Quarter and Scavenger Grounds, which these bullets matter when you already have Expedition Map, you also have access to Blast Zone, 2 copies of Blast Zone. And if you start recurring Blast Zone with Crucible of Worlds, you can actually lock out opponents with low-cost cards.
I like it.
And remember, Blast Zone already starts at 1, letting you bypass, and Chalice of the Void, even if you spend more mana on it, won't count as a 2 or a 4 or whatever. It just sits in play counting as a 0-cost card. And of course, be careful, because Karn the Creator can actually just destroy anybody's Chalice of the Voids with its +1 ability. But this has the amusing interaction of letting you get out of your own Chalice if, for instance, you decide that you need to Expedition Map after all.
Yeah.
So I think Karn the Creator obviously doing really cool things here. Also getting Sorceress Spyglass. Kind of an interesting disruption card.
I feel like maybe I'd want more, right? If I could just go get Sorceress Spyglasses?
I don't know. Here's the thing, though. Activated abilities of sources with a chosen name can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. There's a little bit of a wasted thing there with Karn's static ability already.
Oh, so you could just get Mycosynth Lattice, right? And then that does the same thing? Right?
No.
Because Mycosynth Lattice makes permanents into artifacts, right? And they can't use the activated abilities of artifacts?
Right. So, once you have your Mycosynth Lattice, you have them kind of locked, right? Because the whole big thing here is that if you have Karn and Mycosynth Lattice, not only are you destroying one a turn, your opponent can't tap their land for mana.
What?
Because so Mycosynth Lattice says all permanents are artifacts, right? So your opponent's lands are all artifact lands, and Karn's passive is activated abilities of artifacts your opponent's control can't be activated, such as tap. It doesn't say anything about mana abilities.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
So Karn by itself gets Mycosynth Lattice and then locks your opponent out of being able to get mana anymore.
I honestly feel
Isn't that busted?
People should just play like 3 Mycosynth Lattice in their main deck then. I mean, like in these mana engine decks, like you can just cast that stuff.
The fact that you only want the Lattice when you have Karn, and Karn tutors for the Lattice. How much are you really getting by putting more copies in the deck, you know?
I don't know. I guess you're right. I guess you don't really want to just have redundancy on it, considering the fact that Karn just gets it. That's so powerful. Like, I feel like maybe there's just a
that's format warping.
That should, like, what if there was just a Planeswalker deck like the blue-white decks we were talking about before? They just played Karn, and the only artifact in their sideboard was Mycosynth Lattice.
There's just no way you're not going to have at least one, like, Walking Ballista or Wormcoil,
or whatever.
one Graveyard Hate card. But yeah, in general, I think Karn is this a revolutionary card for Modern, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely spectacular. But that wasn't even the only colorless Planeswalker that Pathy played from War of the Spark.
So Ugin the Ineffable, and we're used to seeing Ugin alongside Tron, but this is other Ugin. This is the new Ugin. Ugin the Ineffable.
This is like the discount Ugin.
Yeah, 6
Literally.
cost. Colorless spells you cast cost 2 less, which in this deck is everything. Exile the top card of your library face down and look at it. Create a 2/2 colorless spirit creature token, and when it leaves the battlefield, you put the exile card into your hand. So it's a way to forward progress, but it's not that, it's not everything. But then -3, destroy target permanent that's 1 or more colors. Now, obviously, this doesn't work once you have Mycosynth Lattice, but if you have Mycosynth Lattice and Karn together, you've basically already won anyway. But if you just need to solve problems, Ugin solves a lot of problems. And the fact that it makes Ulamog only 8 to play, the fact that it makes your expedition maps playable even under a Chalice of the Void, the fact that it lets you basically just have another robust threat that doesn't get stopped by spot removal. I think it's just trying to be a well-rounded role player.
I think this deck is a really important kind of new thing between Ensnaring Bridge, Mycosynth Lattice, etc. Like, this deck can become an artifact prison, like, pretty easily. Right?
Yeah, what I wonder is, what about just playing one of those, like something a little bit more prison-oriented game 1, and just try to get people under Karn plus Mycosynth Lattice?
Like, I feel like maybe a Whir deck might be a good place to play these cards.
The only thing is you can't Whir for Karn.
Yeah, but you can tutor for. I mean, you can cantrip for Karn or something like that in a Whir deck.
Maybe. Right? You know what you could do though? I mean, why not? You could Narset it to go find Karn.
Yeah, you certainly can. Yeah, these cards are so powerful in Modern.
Yeah, I think Karn is format warping. I think we got to explore a lot more there. I think we're only scratching the surface of what Karn the Creator means, because I think that this whole one card lock that's so disruptive game 1 to start with, that has so many options for how to, I think that's going to be a very, very, very influential card. I mean,
I know you already loved War of the Spark from, the perspective of its design and development.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, but the power, for instance, it's all fun and games when you're doing sweet stuff, but look at BMJ's Tron deck that just has 8 Karns in it. 4 Karn Liberated, 4 Karn the Great Creator. When you've got 4 Karn the Great Creator, and you're playing Big Tron, and you got Ancient Stirrings, Finding Karn, and you still set up the Mycosynth Lattice combo. I don't know, man.
You think this might not be fun anymore?
This guy's the bad guy.
Yeah, well, I think that at the point that the mono green deck is the bad guy, I guess it has 4 forests. How mono green is this deck really?
Yeah. I think it's bold Lamp-a-Lot playing Affinity.
Well, maybe they just didn't get the Karn the Great Creator memo.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another Karn the Great Creator deck. It's another Titan Azusa deck, but with 4 Karn the Great Creators. Definitely just Karn the Great Creator a lot of places. I wonder if Karn the Great Creator... why not just put that in one of these blue-white Planeswalker decks like you were talking about earlier? Why not flesh that out a little?
Yeah, I don't know that you have to play it in... it could just be in, theoretically, any shell that can get to 6. Right?
Right.
That seems really... there's a lot of decks that can plausibly get to 6, like Control-ish decks, other mid-range decks. You're just so far ahead. If you can just defend your Planeswalker for 1 turn, and then just... Like any deck that's not blue just probably can't stop you. That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. People are going to need to have some answers, but it's so tough because you could just put Karn into play and then use it, and you're like ahead on cards already too.
Oh yeah, so I've seen
such a robust plan.
Like Teferi into Karn, that's why I liked it in the blue-white. Like you stop them from being able to do anything, right? Like they can't counter you. Just how it works.
There's another new piece of technology in the form of the blue-black deck piloted by the Floatist. The Floatist was playing blue-black with 4 Liliana of the Veil, 3 Jace the Mind Sculptor. And those 4 Liliana of the Veil have particular meaning here because of 3 copies of Liliana's Triumph.
And what do you think of Liliana's Triumph here as the spot removal spell of choice? Now, notably, even if your opponent has no creatures, you can Triumph them when you have Liliana to make them discard an extra card.
At instant speed also, right? So if they
in the middle of their draw step.
Yeah, if they've got only 1 card, then you just nab them. It's obviously really powerful and synergistic with Liliana the Veil. And I think like that Liliana the Veil, Jace the Mind Sculptor 1-2 punch has always been pretty cool, right? Where Liliana's messing both players up, and then Jace is getting you far enough ahead that you're just ahead.
Right.
Tons of discard here, right? So Inquisition of Kozilek, Liliana's Triumph, all contributing to the get rid of people's hand. It's probably pretty easy to lock them in this deck.
And then Blast Zone making another appearance, just as kind of a niche role player. It's tough to play too many colorless lands when you're also playing Cryptic Command, but 4 Field of Ruin and 1 Blast Zone, definitely pushing it to the limit, along with these 2 swamps.
How do you feel about Dimir versus Azorius in Modern?
I'm more drawn to Azorius. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to play Liliana and all that, but I just... although, I don't know. You still get Ashiok and Narset. You lose out on Teferis. I'd have to see what it looks like, but I also would play Ashiok instead of not.
Do you think Kalitas is strong enough here versus just playing Karn the Great Creator?
No.
I feel like Karn the Great Creator would be perfect in this deck.
Yeah, I would play Karn the Great Creator. Yep. The one thing I know is all of my next generation decks are going to be Karn the Great Creator decks.
Yeah, like you could just like completely lock them out with your black cards and keep them off balance with, Jace and your light permission package, and then you're just like, all right, looks like you're a little bit beat up. Time to create something great.
So there's kind of an interesting little twist, a variation of the Mycosynth Lattice thing for when you don't have that much time in the sideboard of Instant Death 929. So they have the Mycosynth Lattice to go along with their 4 Karn the Great Creators, in another Amulet of Vigor deck. But they've got a liquid metal coating. And liquid metal coating is interesting in that you can, like if you don't have 6 mana yet, you could go Karn, and on turn 5, because you went and got liquid metal coating, you can play liquid metal coating now on a key permanent in some cases to disrupt its ability to be activated. Additionally, you could use liquid metal coating each turn to let Karn actually be destroying the land in the meantime. You don't get to mana lock them right away, but if you just need to solve particular problems, liquid metal coating does have some amount of, it's a lot faster. You get a lot less of the effect, but you can be a lot faster.
Do you think that there's possibly some kind of utter nonsense deck that's like 3 liquid metal coatings in the main deck, 1 in the sideboard, Karn the Great Creator, sideboard Mycosynth Lattice, and then like main deck 4 Ancient Grudge, and maybe some Shattering Sprees, and you're just all in on Karn, Artifact Destruction, etc.
Well,
is that like
I think once you're going to play 3 liquid metal coating, 3+1 liquid metal coatings, you really want to consider playing old school Saheeli, because like when you have liquid metal coating and Saheeli, you can make an arbitrary number of artifact Saheelis. Like you liquid metal coating your Saheeli, and then your Saheeli can copy an artifact, so you choose itself, and the legend rule kills the old one, and you just have a new one, but you can use its ability. So you can create an unlimited number of triggers for artifacts, so that if you had anything that cared about you, like an artifact entering the battlefield, or an artifact leaving the battlefield, or an artifact being destroyed, you just get an unlimited number of triggers. So, I don't know. I'd want to see if there's a way to try to merge those combos. If I was going to play liquid metal coating main deck, I sure would be interested in merging with Saheeli, because you can kill really fast with a liquid metal coating Saheeli combo. Like, for instance, let's just set aside if you would, if this is really the best kill card, but like, isn't there an artifact that costs 1 that every time a permanent enters the battlefield under your control, you mill your opponent? Altar of the Brood is 1 mana artifact. Whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent puts the top card of his or her library into his graveyard. So if you went turn 1 Altar of the Brood, turn 2 liquid metal coating, turn 3 Saheeli, you deck them.
You just got them right there on turn 3.
You got them right there. And 2 of them are artifacts that you could potentially set up with like some kind of war shenanigans or not. But also, Karn pulls them together. And if you're playing liquid metal coating anyway, liquid metal coating works with Karn. And if you're playing Saheeli, Saheeli works with Karn. I don't know. Something kind of. That's kind of interesting. Could be potentially very fast and explosive too. I wonder what the
turn
best
3 kill to start.
Yeah, I wonder what the fastest, because you know how you're talking about Ancient Grudge to blow up people's artifacts. I wonder what the cheapest way to do that with an artifact is. Like, because like you would think that you would want to have something in the sideboard that you could go get. Mycosynth Lattice is the big hard lock or whatever, but like, is there some way that you can go get something from your sideboard that, liquid metal coating lets you destroy one a turn already.
You could get like a relic barrier, right? So if everything's an artifact, you could just like, if they have a creature they might kill you with, you can just tap it. Is that up your alley?
I feel like we could do better than that. Well,
you already created a 3rd turn kill. And I think that it's probably pretty cool to have this in the same deck as some sort of Shattering Spree, Ancient Grudge deck. Because this seems really compelling to me, right? Like, those cards utterly destroy Affinity when you're playing against Affinity, right? But if everybody's Affinity now, because that's how we're playing, it seems pretty awesome to me.
Yep. Yeah, sadly, I don't think there's any Ancient Grudges that literally are artifacts, but I'm going to keep looking. Karn is the closest thing. Either way, man, this is a radical. Karn is part of it, but then also all the other planeswalkers we mentioned, Teferi, Narset, Ashiok. There's just like high impact cards for Modern that are going to be really changing the landscape, and I think people are only beginning to uncover the implications of some of these cards.
Oh yeah, big stuff. But before we sign off, do you mind if we just quickly check out the PTQ for Standard? There were two big pieces of new technology, I think, that hit in that tournament.
Sure.
So the first place player, JMM, played an Arclight Phoenix deck, and this is a look at what a blue-red Arclight Phoenix deck might look like with Augur of Bolas, right? So there's 3 copies of Augur of Bolas in the main deck, 1 in the sideboard, and then there's another new card for More of the Spark, which is 3 copies of Finale of Promise. So there's 2 things going on here for me. One, when do you not bring in the 4th Augur of Bolas, right? I feel like this card is awesome against control, and it's awesome against creatures because it can block. And plus, like, get your Lava Coil or whatever.
I don't know. It's also possible that it's one of those tuning things, like it's Vindicate in the sideboard, where it's just the 61st card, but it's less bad and it's something you can use against everybody. But I'm not positive. I don't know.
I feel like I would always want it. That's the only thing. So, Finale of Promise, though, in this deck, you got Discovery Dispersal, which is, the Discovery side is a 2 casting cost sorcery. You got these opts, Radical Ideas, which are 1 and 2 casting cost instants, alongside Shock, of course, Chart, of course. So, Tormenting Voice. This is like I guess you'd cast it for 4. Is that the idea here?
Yeah, I mean, occasionally you'll go lower, but most of the time you're going to be spending 4 so that you can get both a sorcery and an instant. If you just do it for 3, you can do a Spell Pierce or a Shock timely, but you won't be able to actually hit any 1-cost sorceries. Like, there's no 1-cost sorcery here.
So, but if you play,
I think 2 is what you want. 1 is what you might settle for. 10 is where the real money is at.
Well, I think that you might have nothing going on, and then you just cast this card for 4. If your cards are like, a Tormenting Voice and a Radical Idea, maybe you can cast 2 spells that give you potentially 2 opportunities to dump a card into the graveyard, and then the Finale of Promise is itself an instant or sorcery, right? So you just got an Arclight Phoenix online.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you think that's more cute than good? It feels a little more cute than good to me because the deck only has 1 Discovery Dispersal.
It's also a little tricky because of how much I think Teferi Time Raveler is going to be a real key card. And when Teferi's in play, you can't Finale of Promise. I mean, you can, but it won't do anything.
Well, none of these sorcery speed card draw spells are very good against Teferi.
Or Narset for that matter. So, I don't know. It's possible, but it's not the first or second place I would look.
So, on that point, Misplaced Ginger showing up again came in, looks like 2nd place in this, and Misplaced Ginger played an Esper deck but did not have Narset. So, if he had Narset, he would have been in pretty good position to play against JMM's many cantrips. But he did have a new card for the Esper Hero deck, which is Elite Guard Mage. I did not have this on my short list of cards that were going to make a big splash in Constructed.
So a 2/3 flyer, gain 3 life and draw card is like, have you ever had a Hydroid Crassus?
I have.
And that you were like, well, the first one I'll do for, just X equals 2.
Because you're
right. Elite Guard Mage is a Hydroid Crassus for people who are willing to settle for the backup plan always. And for your trouble, you get 1 extra health on the Guard Mage and 1 extra life point for yourself to keep.
You do not paint an elite picture for Elite Guard Mage. Sad.
The big advantage here is that you get to play with another gold card for your Hero of Precinct 1. And while I don't believe in the Elite Guard Mage at all, my guess is that the theory is that a hostage taker wasn't cutting it, and that we want to play with a different 4, and Elite Guard Mage is a lot easier to cast than something like, say, a Basilica Bellhaunt.
Yeah, I don't understand how this card is anywhere in the same zip code as Basilica Bellhaunt. The Bellhaunt gets you a bunch of life, has a better body, and messes them up.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I can tell you, though, there's a different card that's very unassuming that I think is just quietly one of the sweetest pieces of tech to come out of the last couple, sort of the evolving metagame, which is Law Rune Enforcer, another card that's probably not on a lot of people's lists. I called this one out before, and I'm glad to see it actually showing up. Partly, it looks like a lot of cards that were not good enough, but it's a slightly better rate. So Law Rune Enforcer is white for a 1/2. You can pay a colorless and tap it to tap target creature with converted mana cost 2 or greater. So that's almost everything.
So
like
it's
you
like
can't
a guild
tap other
mage,
people's
right?
ones. Yeah. Yeah, you can tap anything except other people's 1-drops, really. Right? And who cares about tapping their 1-drop for the most part? That mostly just makes it so that 2 of these don't get into some annoying weird showdown. But when you have Law Rune Enforcer, the ability to get past something like a Lyra Dawnbringer or Kefnet, God Eternal Kefnet, it's really great. The opportunity cost is so low because you were already playing 1-cost 1. Like what? You're not going to play a 1-cost 1/2 flyer? Because that's the other thing about this card is that it's a 1/2. You really want to limit your exposure to Goblin Chain Whirler. And when it comes to 1-drops, you kind of are limited in how many 1-drop options there really are that can live through a Chain Whirler. We're already playing Snubhorn Sentry, right? But the fact that Law Rune Enforcer lives through Chain Whirler while then giving you some powerful tactical options, and it's not like you have to spend very much. I mean, what's 1 mana between friends?
This deck has got such cheap casting costs. When the game goes a little long, it's got nothing to do with that mana.
Right. So I realized that it's like, you look at it, you're like, well, it costs 1 mana less than like a Master Decoy that would not sniff constructed, right? And its ability is more limited. You can't tap anything. You can only tap something that's costs 2 or more. Well, 2 or more is almost everything. And the difference between a card costing 1 or a card costing 2 is all the difference in the world.
So I always have a question, because this is like my favorite card in Standard right now, but I don't know what it does here. Teferi Time Raveler is not getting all of his money in this deck, is it?
I like Teferi Time Raveler here, actually. The only part I don't like is that there are too many 3-drops. When you're playing 4 History of Benalia, 2 Gideon Blackblade, 2 Teferi Time Raveler, and 4 Benalish Marshal, I think you're a little bit, you're taking some liberties that I'm not sure are justified. Setting that aside, however, the reason I like Teferi in here is that I think that it is so it does 2 really, really different, actually 3 different important jobs. So the first job is that the tempo play of play Teferi and use it as a mana ward is actually big. You play Teferi, bounce, and get rid of a blocker or a key card at a key time. It's a great swing.
Yeah, most people would be willing to pay 4 mana for that effect and be happy about it.
But anyway, so it has a second purpose, which is when you play against Nexus of Fate, they don't get to use, if you just have Teferi, like we talked about last week, if you just have Teferi, they don't get to untap with Wilderness Reclamation and spend it on anything.
Oh, that's just a huge game, right? So you just, even if it does nothing else but mess up Nexus of Fate, that's a really good
It goes even further.
Deck, right?
It goes even further. When you have Teferi in play, they can never cast Fog.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Right?
Yeah,
so it stops their defense and it stops their proactive plan at the same time.
Right. So I actually like Teferi in terms of shoring up some weaknesses in white. I just think 3-cost cards are tight. That said, part of the reason I like Splashing Blue is that I love Dovin's Veto in this deck. I think that when you come with a package of Dovin's Vetoes and Teferi Time Ravelers, and I love to see the other two in the sideboard here, I could believe 1 stroke 3 Veto. That's probably better than 4 Veto. But I think that when you come with that permission package and a playset of Teferi Time Ravelers, it just is such a powerful added dimension.
Oh, yeah. I think that just does an amazing job of shoring up what in other contexts would be a horrendous matchup in Simic.
Yep. There's another Teferi Time Raveler white aggro deck that has another kind of twist. 2 copies of Tomic Distinguished Advocates in Brielle 2's deck. So here, Tomic is primarily a 2/3 flyer, right?
Yeah.
Like, is there anything else you're really doing?
But that's fine, right? A 2/3 flyer for 2?
Yeah, and you know, the thing I particularly like about it is that you're living through other people's cry of the Carnariums.
That's really good for 2 mana, right? It's got good text anyway. Like, he matches up well against other people's 2-drops, generally speaking. Like, he just eats like a Viashino.
Mm-hmm. So, I take it you're in for Tomic? Because normally people in this spot play stuff like Tithe Taker or something, you know?
Yeah, I like it.
Or as we saw above, sometimes you just play more Adanto Vanguards. I don't know. Or more 3s. I like being disciplined on the number of 3s, though.
I think I like Brielle 2's 6th place deck better with the Tomics and the 4 Teferis in the main deck. Now that I understand how Teferi works in the Azorius aggro deck, I'm in.
So there's another little sort of evolution this week, which is some, not all, Grixis players have figured out to move towards Bedeck Bedazzle. So Bedeck Bedazzle, I mean, there's no shortage of 2-cost options for a Grixis player, right? But there's a new breed of Planeswalker heavy Grixis decks. And for instance, Bante's list here features 2 Narset, 4 Nicol Bolas Dragon God, 1 Ugin the Ineffable main deck, 2 Liliana Dreadhorde General. So when you've got all these Planeswalkers, and then also Nicol Bolas the Ravager, you start getting into a space of not really being able to support Augur of Bolas anymore. Okay, well, if you don't have Augur of Bolas, the Tyrant Scorn starts losing a little bit of its luster. And if you've got Bedeck Bedazzle as a 2-cost removal option, at the baseline, it's going to function a lot like a Lightning Strike. You're not going to be able to go upstairs or hit a Planeswalker with it, except if you have, like, for instance, your Bolas is attacking, you can get 3 extra damage that way occasionally. The real thing, though, is that Bedeck is a -3 to toughness, so you can actually kill things like Adanto Vanguard.
Pretty cool.
What's more, it has a much more attractive option against creatureless or nearly creatureless decks. Tyrant Scorn, you have to work to try to turn your Augur of Bolas into a cantrip. But if you have Bedazzle, it's not very mana efficient. But once you actually are hanging out, you have this 6-cost Stone Rain that does 2 to them, or they're Planeswalkers. So you can use it to get out from under a Search for Azcanta.
It's also an instant, right? So, you can set them up and you're just all right, Bedazzle you end of turn, and they might not like that. You know, if you're in a matchup where the Bedazzle is good, they might try to counterspell you, and then you get to, resolve your Ugin or your Liliana on your main phase.
Totally. So I really like Bedeck Bedazzle when you have both black and red mana and you're playing a control deck.
I can't wait to cast Nicol Bolas the Ravager and then untap and then cast Nicol Bolas Dragon God, because all my stuff is going to resolve.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's just true, though. You deserve to have your stuff resolve.
Yeah, I am. I'm telling you right now it's going to resolve, and then my other thing is going to resolve, and they're not going to have any cards in hand, and that's it.
There are a couple other really hardcore decks from this weekend, one of which uses Bedeck Bedazzle in a different way. Jed G1 in fifth place was playing a well, I guess it's still just a Grixis deck, but it's a Grixis deck that has 4 Kiora Behemoth Beckoner, 3 Sarkhan the Masterless, and 3 Nicobolas Dragon God, with 4 Soul Diviner. What do you think of Soul Diviner here?
Well, so Soul Diviner is a zombie wizard. We talked about it a little bit before. It's a 2/3 for a Dimir, right? It's for 1 black and 1 blue, and then it has the ability tap, remove a counter from an artifact, creature, land, or planeswalker you control to draw a card. You got plenty of things with counters, right? There's 10 planeswalkers in this deck, so you can basically like add a loyalty and tap and draw a card. Now, if you've got Kiora Behemoth Beckoner, you have the -1 ability to untap, right? So you got like a little double action there, right? So
Kiora accelerates you into Bolas or Sarkhan, but you can also use it with the Soul Diviner twice. That's kind of sweet because you're getting it both ways. Soul Diviner is taking the counter off Kiora, but Kiora takes the counter off herself to let you Soul Diviner again. You can't keep it up for very many turns, but you can get a burst of extra cards.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. And then, the Kiora the next turn is going to get a little money from Nicobolas the Ravager, right? Like, because that's a 4 or greater power creature.
Or Sarkhan. She works so well with Sarkhan. Because when you make the dragon, you draw a card.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then when you make everything dragons, you're attacking for 12. You know, so like,
I think there are elements of this deck that I like the best amongst the Grixis decks.
Now there's a very different Soul Diviner deck, the Esper Soul Diviner deck played by Aspiring Spike. First of all, 4 Teferi Time Raveler, 4 Teferi Hero of Dominaria, 4 Narset Parter of Veils, 2 Liliana Dreadhorde General, and 3 Dovin Hand of Control.
I have played against Dovin Hand of Control with other, control / planeswalker decks. It is shockingly relevant.
Really disrupts card draw.
Yeah.
But also can make removal a little more awkward.
It's just so annoying.
So with 17 planeswalkers, we see a couple things emerge. First of all, 2 Oath of Kaya. I know you like that. 1 Mox Amber. I can believe it, but I don't know. Maybe fancy.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of legendary permanents in this deck.
And then 1 Mobilized District. And then 2 the Elder Spell.
See, but that's the thing, right? There's so many planeswalkers, you could just ultimate somebody.
And hopefully it's Teferi or Liliana. Because the other ones don't have ultimates.
It could be one of those two. Yeah.
Those are a couple of really good ultimates to ultimate, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a deck, especially with so many ways to, like, if you've got Soul Diviner in play, for example. I mean, ultimating Teferi that's just turbo win.
So I like the Devril Rogue Shadow. I like the Devril Rogue Shadow Mage sideboard plan. Just more grinding. It's another planeswalker, what do you think of Casmina Enigmatic Mentor? I don't know how to feel about this one.
I'm not a huge fan. I feel like, I don't know, there's just so many planeswalkers in this deck already, and like adding to Devril.
Well, this protects it.
Yeah, I mean, there's another Ugin in the sideboard. I feel like I would just want to have more different kind of stuff. Like, for example, this deck has 4 Tyrant Scorn for instance in the main deck, and doesn't have like an overabundance of negate type stuff. Like there's some Dovin's Vetoes in the sideboard. I think I just want more ways to defend my board position.
I can see that. I would want more Oath of Kaias personally. I'm into that card.
Yeah, there's like 3. I mean, you could get like a 4.
2+1. Yeah. But yeah, it'd be nice to have some cheaper interaction.
The thing I mean, obviously Oath of Kaya is just whiz-bang awesome when it's working, but Aspiring Spike's deck has got like 2+1 Oath of Kaias and then 2 Moment of Cravings and 2 Enter the God Eternals, I think seemingly as their anti-red deck plan. like this plan is just foiled by one Tybalt. Like I'd just be like a little wary of that. I don't know.
You got to be attacking.
But there's not. What are you gonna? You know?
Yeah. No, I agree.
Like you're just not like. Are you gonna have Elder Spell in against mono red? Like no, right? Like I guess they probably have two different kinds of planeswalkers after sideboarding, but like you are just utterly shut down by Tybalt. You know your whole sideboard plan. So I'd want to do something a little bit different there.
I think that's reasonable. Did you see over in the? I guess it's too bad here. Actually, the Ajani, the green-white deck here is using old Ajani Adversary of Tyrants, but I actually like the new Ajani. So in the Classic this weekend in Richmond, there was a top 16 Celestia Angels deck. Peter Sotile played. It's the sort of it's a hybrid. It's got the Lyra Dawnbringer, Shalai, Voice of Plenty, Resplendent Angel thing going on, but then it's also a God Eternal Aketra, Wildgrowth Walker, Merfolk Branch Walker, Jade Light Ranger kind of deck. So it's got all that action, but the sauce, the real spice here in the sideboard, Ajani the Greathearted. I think Ajani the Greathearted is pretty underrated. People have talked about putting it with Planeswalkers because it's so evocative, the idea of just stacking loyalty counters and other things. But I think it does a lot for these decks that, like here, we see there's only 4 Planeswalkers main deck. You know, and you could board in a Gideon and a couple of Ajani's, and it's not really helping itself, but you're getting a little action there. But really what's going on is that you're antheming your whole team, not just 2 creatures a turn like Ajani, Adversary of Tyrants. And then your whole team having Vigilance is a very powerful passive. Like, picture you bring in Ajani the Greathearted against red. Wow, do you have some creatures in this deck that would love to play both sides, attacking and blocking, right?
I mean, even your fail state is like gain 3 life, you're up
well, that's
6.
where I was going next. I think if you're gaining 3 life a turn on a Planeswalker that goes to 6 loyalty immediately, that is devastating to the red deck. If they don't have Tybalt in play, they are never going to race that.
No, I mean, the thing is, like, Tybalt is so unexciting in this matchup, right? This deck has got, like, God Eternal Oketra, Lyra Dawnbringer, Shalai Voice of Plenty. Like, Tybalt's just dead, right, to begin with. There's just too much high toughness evasion creatures, you know, like that. I don't know. I think that the red mage is in a lot of trouble in this matchup.
Yeah. So I love Ajani the Greathearted in pretty narrow situations. There's a little bit of TRGR because this deck's not going to be the worst against such a deck anyway.
I mean, there's main deck Knight of Autumn. I mean, look, pick a mode. Whichever mode you want.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know, man. Definitely plenty of evolution for standard, but I'm still just hung up on how format changing War of the Spark has been already, and I think we've only seen the beginning. Once the the modern special, Modern Horizon set drops, if this set is any indication, I think all bets are off of what the format's even going to look like.
Oh yeah,
I seriously don't understand. I don't understand this Karn the Creator thing, though. I just don't understand how this isn't just busted with Michael Synthlatus.
It just seems busted. I think that we're just going to have to... I mean, if people are aiming for it, right? Like, let's say people go back to the Ancient Grudge type stuff instead of not the Ancient Grudge type stuff. You can easily counter it, right? You just have to play conservatively against a deck with those cards. But it's really good if people don't know what's coming. Like, the turn you play Karn, you could just, like, plus him or something and put somebody in front of him to defend. And then the second turn that he's in play, then you just go immediately get the Lattice and play it. If they don't have a response right then and there, they're basically locked. That's quite strong.
All right, man. Well, that's it for this week, man. I guess let's go brew some Karn decks, and I'll see you next week.
All right. Night, Patrick.
and life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, so jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis days. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind.